that he looks the part, and he's going to go and do his job. But it's important to be able to show up ready to do what your job is. It's cool. It's good to see the results of that effort when they, fly straight.
Yeah. Go out and do their own thing.
Yeah. My son actually my oldest son sent me a note yesterday to my wife and I. That was the first time we've really received one of these sort of things from him, but he sent us a screenshot from his boss, and just a shout out to him for doing a fabulous job, and the fact that he's just such a pleasure to work with, and he's got these skills and things that you can't learn, cannot be successful without him. It's just, he's pretty proud. So he sent it to his mother and I last night.
Oh, that's
Very nice.
Proud moment, cool stuff.
Yes. Welcome, Linda.
Hey, it's good to be
Hey,
with you
Linda.
guys.
How are you?
I'm good.
Good.
Good morning.
Family.
Good morning. Yeah.
Hey, Linda, since we had to jump off that other call, I'm going to see if I can get that recording.
That would be wonderful. I was taking some notes, and just, it's one of those things that it's helpful to have an awareness around just in general, but yeah, this whole board thing and governance, and it all plays into this, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Well, speaking of, I guess we should go ahead and get started. First of all, I'll be happy to know that I already hit the record button, so I'm getting better, slowly but surely.
Nice job, Denise.
Yeah, well, I should be able to hit the record button at least, right? It's not that difficult. Okay, so for the purposes of the record, it is August 14th. We are having the DFM Data Core Steering Committee meeting. This is our third meeting, and I'd like to welcome and do a roll call. We have Linda Getz, we have Michael Darden, and we have Jeff Hurley. We will be joined later by guest invitation at the top of the hour at 10 by David Wolf and by Mike Turner. We start with our antitrust policy, recognizing that we have some changes to make to that based on some advice of our IP attorney, which is why that is sort of redlined. We're still having discussions with that, but still we all recognize our antitrust policy. By the way, this also refers to the antitrust policy in Article 5, which is in the corporate bylaws. Okay, so we are going to do approval of the agenda. I sent this out yesterday, so I'll just give everyone a couple of quick minutes to look at that, and then I will ask for a motion to approve, and then a second.
Motion to approve.
Okay.
And second.
All right, thank you. Any dissent? Hearing none?
No, stop.
Now we have meeting minutes, and I'm going to do a quick share on those. Those were sent on Tuesday. Let me do a real quick reshare here, because there is one point that we do need to discuss. All right, so these are the meeting minutes of August 2nd. These were distributed this past Tuesday. We had several good discussions and several resolutions that passed. They were the classes of members. We agreed to contributing member as opposed to associate member. We discussed the required documents. We discussed the steering committee member criteria. For the DFMs, we also discussed the contributing member criteria, but we didn't actually finalize on that particular conversation. So are the contributing members also required to have a 3-month participation in a working group as evidenced by a 70% voting record?
If I remember the conversation, it was stated that because they were contributing out of their field of expertise, there would be some that it was appropriate for them to be invited into, but there wasn't a necessity to have a certain percentage of voting record. I'm not sure if that's everyone else's recollection as well, but that's my recollection. And granted, I was not voting during that time and had been under sedation, so.
Welcome back.
Thanks.
I did go back and listen to the entire recording, and I do remember the conversation, but we never actually agreed on the contributing members and if they are required or not required to participate in a working group and or have a voting record. So if we could have the discussion now, and then we can go ahead and approve the minutes. So are you, Jeff and Michael, are you fine with that position as stated by Linda?
I think there's just an element to this that is based off of the discussion that we had with Keith the other day, as far as how Linda prescribed this from a voting perspective of how this would play out for what their votes are. And it's probably important to identify here that from an antitrust perspective, what Keith had identified is that if these contributing members were placed by the board, that they truly don't get separate votes, that they were basically, there's one company, one vote, DFM Data Corp placing a company to be able to be into a position, then they are being placed into a position that's considered as being, you know, an expected vote for the board. And that there's some discussion to be had around that and what the initial layout or expected layout of what the 11-member committee was going to look like. So 6 of them being DFMs, but I think ultimately what I heard Keith saying is that the 5 that we were saying were going to be the initial standing up of the steering committee that was going to be disbanded, that their vote truly would count as 1.
From a voting perspective, yes, that is correct. And what we also have said is if a DFM member wants to be included in the steering committee, there are things they must do. And first, they have to participate for 3 months in a working group, and they have to participate, and it looks like this, 70% voting record. If you get away,
I think it's reasonable to cross that over to the other, to the contributing member as well, if that's the short answer to your question.
That is the question. So the contributing members are also required in order to be a contributing member. So again, Michael, you're going to have contributing members who are just coming on board, right? They're not going to have a chance to, have 3 months participation in a working group.
That would delay the move from 3 to 5.
Potentially.
For at least, the 3 months.
And the question is, do the contributing members have a designation inside the system where their votes can be tabulated and managed similarly to the DFMs?
So we can, and haven't defined that piece yet. And the documents that were sent out before in preparation for this meeting of the contributing member memorandum of understanding and the contributing member agreement and rules documents are really the documents that we didn't have in the last meeting to be able to even have the discussion around, and why I think if this one point is what's holding up the approving of the minutes and moving on to the discussion of the documents, I think the purpose of the working session is to be able to get to the determination of usefulness of the current versions or need for edit of the current versions. And I'm not sure we can, if you guys are comfortable having this in there at the moment, or just be part of what's added, after we have the working session, because it wasn't resolved in the last meeting. And what was resolved was that we didn't have a contributing member agreement, and that we would need to be able to work through that contributing member agreement in order to be able to do this. And now we have a draft of that contributing member agreement, but we haven't spent the time as a group working through that. And I think that's the purpose of the next 2 hours.
This is a working group timeframe. This is not a creating new.
Correct.
Okay, so that, I guess that answers the question. We don't need to address this, and it can be entered as new business for the next.
Got it. Okay. I didn't think I just want to make certain that I had not missed something, that there was an agreement that I just missed. I mean, I did go back and re-listen to it. I didn't think I did, but
Yeah, my recollection of it is, and I appreciate the fact that we have the recording and did go back through it. My recollection was, just from a feeling standpoint of the work, was the fact that we needed to be able to put the effort into the contributing member agreement and the memorandum of understanding of that for to be able to reach conclusion on that point, and that's why we didn't come to a conclusion then. We just kind of tabled it. So
okay, then for the purposes of accepting these meeting minutes last week, I'm going to strike this as new business and then need a motion to approve the meeting minutes of August 7th.
Motion to approve.
Second?
Seconded.
Okay. And hearing no dissent, I will consider that passed, and I'm going to go back to the share of the agenda. Okay. All right. So again, this is definitely, thank you for that, guys. This is, as discussed, very much of a working session. So let me just put this a little bit in context so you see this. This is the timeline of the documents. And of course, we're going to talk about the membership agreement and the MOU today. But we also have these other agreements. So I wanted you to see the document type, how we plan to navigate. This is not set in stone. We're still talking through it, but how we plan to navigate in the command center. And then these are timelines here. So again, we're doing this today, MOU and the member agreements, but we do have a schedule and a timeline for the others. The plan, certainly the purpose is next week. It won't be a review session. It will be we like approval of these documents, and then we'll record them for the board. Okay. So I'll put it up here. I'll do a screen share of the, and I'm going to start with the DFM member agreement. But if you could also have that in front of you, it might be helpful, because sometimes the navigation, as you guys know, gets a little wonky. I just think, Michael, that's probably a good place to start with.
I think it's, before we go down that path, I think since Linda would be a contributing member, and the order of what she would see, or a user that was like her would see, is the contributing member memorandum of understanding and the contributing member agreement and rules. And that's a simplified version of what the more complex DFM member version is. So I think if we started with the one that was related to the contributing member and kind of saw the formation of that and how the pieces come together, when we get into the detail of the DFM member one, it might be easier to be able to differentiate. Does that make sense?
Yeah, actually that makes perfect sense. So yeah, let me definitely.
That's the way I reviewed it as well.
Logical
built up to it.
flow.
All right, so let me start with that then. I just have to navigate through 4 different documents. So let's start with the an easy one. Let's start with the contributing member MOU.
Yeah, and I just wanted to ask, I know you were going to talk to John. Did you talk to him last night, or are you scheduled to talk to him after this meeting? What have we arranged with him, or have we?
I have talked to him, or rather we communicated, and he said the documents look fine. So I will go back, and when he has.
Could I get off with that too and just be like,
No.
the document?
Nice. But yeah. All right, so now I want you to see the contributing member MOU. This is fairly simple. And Linda, just so you know, a person who agrees by clicking the correct box that they are a signatory on behalf of their company is going to land on this landing page where they have to click through it. So they'll see this.
So just for clarity, Linda, for in the system, in the command center application, there will be the creation of a role that is a role type of a contributing member. And that contributing member will have a first name, last name, email address that is identified, as well as their status of being a contributing member, where we'll send an email with a unique link and a gobbledygook password for you to copy and paste after clicking the link. And at the point of clicking that unique link and pasting in your old password, there is a display of the create your new password of what you want it to be for yourself, and a confirm that. And then there's a split of buttons for confirmation, whether the user is an authorized signator for their company or not, and the button that's required to be checked in order to be able to illuminate the submit button, which is the agreeing to the terms and conditions of enjoying the platform. So,
but a contributing member doesn't particularly, quote, enjoy the platform.
Well,
or am I not understanding?
They're going to access the platform from the purpose of what's inside the terms and conditions is the non-disclosure agreement, the confidentiality of not downloading documents from here and sharing them to other places. It's just what you would normally see on a website on the bottom as being your terms and conditions and your privacy policy. Mm-hmm. We have a privacy policy, but we haven't written the terms and conditions of users that are entering here. And all we're saying is that when someone is entering, the customary method of there being a privacy policy and a terms and condition policy linked below the sign-on is the method that we're prescribing to. And Denise has a screenshot of this, actually.
I'm right there. Yeah.
Okay. So
there's the system actually. Just to go into a little bit more detail for this, since we are in a working session, the assumption is that you're expressing your interest in being a contributing member, and in that conversation there is a role for me as a super admin user to create for you as a new user in what's called step 9. And step 9 pushes a association of your credentials, your PID that we capture to be able to send that credential for you to land on this page here. Okay. And you'll see where Denise currently has a button 1 and a button 2. That's what's being added to this page, where the submit button will slide down, and button 1 is related to this person self-identifying that they are an authorized signatory for their organization.
So it's just a checkbox.
It's just a checkbox. Okay. That's correct. And then box 2 is I acknowledge to continue browsing of this website is subject to the terms and conditions, and the terms and conditions are right below it. Okay. So by checking I agree to the terms and conditions, or I acknowledge the terms and conditions, the submit button then illuminates. But the submit button is not able to be activated until somebody has selected box 2 at a minimum. If they select box 1, then they have the ability on behalf of the organization that they are a contributing member for, or that they are associated with as an organization, to be able to access the governance panel. And the governance panel is where the voting and where the access to documents are located.
Okay, so every contributing member is going to be acting on behalf of an organization?
From a hierarchy of the systemics perspective, there is an organization that that each user is tied to.
Okay, so I'm just wondering how John Greaves.
Yeah, well, I would say that there would be an organization that we created that was IEEE, and it would be John being a member of IEEE with his voting, or John being.
That might get some unique cross-organizational issues going.
It could, and it doesn't have to be IEEE. It could be any designee that we are saying for John, or could be the fact that we identify a new class of company that is literally the the contributing member organization, where it's not truly an organization, but they are a member of that, as opposed to being of their company.
Mhm.
I mean, it's basically dynamic in the system. So I can generate a company with a group, with associated groups and associated roles, and they're all configurable.
Mhm. Yeah, I was just thinking of the dynamics of what we're going to need in regard to the beginning committee, that what you're saying is collectively going to be getting a vote when it has the 6 DFMs join. I'm just not 100% sure how this setup should be done in regards to making sure that that is handled in a way that doesn't create issues with.
So Denise and I had an
us.
hour-long conversation around this morning, and an hour-long conversation around it yesterday. It's complex. It's truly complex here to identify. We want to simplify the documents as much as possible and make it so
Right.
that the user experience is simple. So the terms
Mhm.
and conditions, we want to be able to be very transparent and very dense with the content of our antitrust, and with our non-disclosure agreement, and with the ethics group of how to be able to operate in a community environment, and some terms and conditions that Sparks is going to be putting together.
Mhm.
And not planning on having multiple versions of those terms and conditions, truly planning on them being the terms and conditions for use of the website. And the privacy document is already very well buttoned up. It was one of the very first things that I had to get the attorneys to do. But there's different paths here, and we want to be able to try to limit the number of paths we have to program for at the moment that they come in.
I understand Linda's concern. So John, or you, Linda, coming in, you could certainly say behalf of what organization. Is it, Blockchain Chamber of Commerce? Is it DFMDC? John's not coming in officially as an IEEE member. We've tapped him for his standards experience. Technically on behalf of myself or my organization would probably.
But if you do "or," then that allows the wiggle room for anybody who's coming in who should be just on behalf of their organization.
Right.
So I get the multi-use necessary for this and wanting it to be as straightforward as possible.
If I needed to build a different landing page that was just for the contributing members to be able to log into, that's another option also. I mean, the problem is the fact that we're talking about one user or two users. So building an
Right.
entire wing of an application for two
doesn't make
users to be able to do doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I think just the contributing members that would be coming in under the question mark, being John and I currently, how would I be coming in to this structure? What company do I put that I am authorized to sign on behalf of?
You're not. I mean, I'm not trying to make it so that you're bringing that other company into this fold. I believe you're serving at the moment as an individual, if I understood it correctly.
I've been very clear that I wear multiple hats, and yes, but at the same time, because I do wear a hat within the DFM Data Corp structure, then that's the
You're
whole
counted
antitrust,
as
and I
that
count
vote.
as a DFM vote
That's right.
collectively. So,
John's
and John, how does that work?
He's
He was brought in
the
by DFM.
independent. Well, he's the independent. He doesn't have any role designated with DFM Data Corp at all.
Okay, so you took him off the advisory board?
There is no advisory board. He's been identified as an advisor to the company just because of the fact that there's been relations of conversation with him around the intellectual property as well as the existing standards bodies that are doing work in similar or nearby locations.
All right.
So,
Okay,
I mean,
so he would be an independent vote, is what you're saying.
he is our independent vote. I mean,
You two are not. You two are clearly DFM because you're secretary of the board.
Right.
But John is not.
And Jeff is the other member, and he's clearly a DFM representative.
Okay. So what we're saying is we're starting truly with only one independent vote, and it's a 1-to-1. So if John's not here, do we have a quorum anymore?
Yeah, we do. And we're going to go through that actually because that's laid out in a very structure when we start reviewing the member agreement.
Okay.
For the purposes of the navigation, for the most part, you're right. This is going to be, so I'm Patrick with Minna, and I'm definitely a contributing member. I want Patrick to be not Patrick, right? And the rest of the contributing members, we want them to be there on behalf of a particular organization. Now, I'm a Bob Voltman. Do I want to be there as a representing Bob Voltman CIA? I mean,
Michael, can you mute yourself because it's hard to hear Denise?
Denise is coming in and out.
So I'm Bob. So people like Patrick are clear. People like Kurt is clear. But someone like a Bob Voltman that we just think would be very beneficial to have. Does he click on this as an authorized signatory on behalf of Bob Voltman Inc. or a private company or on behalf of TIA? I'm not.
It's how I set him up. It's how I invite him as far as how the user is created. So if Linda were saying to me that she was Linda on behalf of Linda, then I could set up an organization called Linda Getz and have a user called Linda Getz under the Linda Getz organization. I'm just describing the fact that there's a layer in the system where John Greaves could be John Greaves on behalf of John Greaves. But there's an ability for me to be able to create an organization type, and identify that organization type as being a contributing member individual, and have that organization be that individual's name and have their personal user be the name underneath it. Not an issue technically at all to do at all.
And there
Current
will
day.
That sounds clean.
Yeah, there won't be many of those. For the 3-person board, it's appointed. It passes muster.
And
Yeah,
knowing knowing that you're
tested this with
typing
the
it in the
marketing.
back end, Michael, then the person who's coming in and logging in, it's not on them to enter that data. It's already been entered on their behalf. So that really takes out the question marks.
Yeah, the only way, and it's a good point, Linda, is the fact that the only way you get to this user password reset link is the fact that I created you as a user. You got a one-off link because of some communication that made it so that this happened. It wasn't off of a website. It wasn't a self-certification of a link to generate your, this is by invite.
That makes it make sense and clean. And me being one of the 2 people that might have a question mark around that, you were putting it in the back end that I'm on the board representing as the secretary of DFM. So I come in under that umbrella. There's no questions. So.
Yep.
Okay.
Good question, because Michael and I had the same question.
It is, and the flexibility that we've built into the application enables this sort of an element. We've tested this with things like governance and with things like marketing and marketing contacts and newspaper contacts and press contacts, where they're organizations that are not DFM types, they're organizations that are media types.
Right.
And we still need to track them. We still need to track our relationships with them. So we've incorporated the ability to be able to generate a new type of organization that can be added. And in this case, I could add one that was a contributing member type. And making a contributing member type and creating the organizations of you as the individual and John Greaves as the individual, I think is really clean.
Okay, so I'm going to, just to push on, guys, because we have a lot to cover here. So going back to the contributing member MOU. So now you sort of understand the navigation, Lyndon. I think that was sort of important to have. So now you're going to see this. This is very simple. This
Very
is
straightforward. Yeah.
not meant to be at all. It's non-binding. It's just, it's meant to be a formal recognition, and you do have to agree and then continue. So you have to check agree and then check submit so that you can continue the system.
Whereas again, right now it's as a legal document, with we sign on one side and you sign on the other. This will be turned into an online click form for this very first user that identified themselves as being the signator for the account. They will see this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Denise?
this
See this.
straightforward.
All that goes away, right? That turns into a free button. But this is what they will see.
Yeah. Denise, the only language on here that I question about is the all of this MOU.
Mm-hmm.
Does that, in that you're looking at this page, does that, will somebody question whether there is something else to it? Or is that just legal language saying what you're seeing on this page is the entirety of it?
It's out of the original MOU. So I assume it's legal language. I don't know it's actually required.
I believe you could actually just remove the all of for this, and it just,
and just say
this MOU is a non-binding agreement except as referenced in terms and conditions on the webpage contained in this document.
Excellent. Okay. I'm gonna give you a minute, because then if you're okay with this, I would like to move on to the next. Remember, guys, we're not approving this.
Right. No, it's very straightforward. And what the contributing member is saying they're bringing to the table is an interest in contributing to the improved performance of the industry. So that's the dual value add.
The first whereas here actually has the phrase whereas DFM Data Corp, comma, without the ink, but we've already described it in the first sentence. So you can actually just do DFMDC there.
Yeah, you're right.
And is governance onboarding process? You have on number 3, you have governance and onboarding capitalized, but process not. Is governance onboarding a titled entity in itself, or?
That's a good catch. So the governance onboarding was capitalized intentionally because there is a specific module, which is the governance onboarding module that you have to complete. And it might be better if I say module capital M. That is part of the command center. And then
and that's on number 3 as well.
Again, this is pretty straightforward. Just, you got to go through this process. You got to click through the module. You're going to have things to do. You're not going to have much. You're going to have this, and then you're going to have the, everyone's going to see the terms and conditions. We'll talk about that in a minute. And then, so you're going to have the MOU, the terms and conditions, and then just the member agreement, the member agreement. That's it.
So Denise, on that same one where you just replaced the DFM DC at the beginning of it, at the end of that sentence, we have performance of the DFM industry, but that's not defined anyplace, and that should just be the digital freight industry.
Yep. Good.
And with the first whereas as well? Or can you do that and put DFM after digital freight industry and then just put DFM on the second one?
I can do it either way.
Yeah, you're either redundant or you bring in the DFM abbreviation.
Yeah, and it's not used anywhere else in this document of the DFM, so you really have the option to do it either way.
It's only used twice there, right?
Right, so you don't really need to make the connection to the term DFM here to confuse this memorandum, because it's already got our DFM in there several places where it's embedded within our name. So I think it's probably better for us to try to keep the acronym out of this document if possible.
Yeah, me too, because DFM member is also a completely separate DFM MOU, DFM member. So this
Right.
doesn't confuse the two types of members either.
Yep. Okay. Participating in the utility. That's, I'm just looking at it going, okay, what does that mean? I'm knowing that I'm going to be contributing to a governance council or board, but the participating in the utility, I'm just not quite sure what that means for me.
Yeah. Really, it's the utility services provided by DFMDC, more generically.
Right, but we're also trying to eliminate the word utility for Keith's purposes of confusion with other things, right?
Yeah, well, we haven't agreed on that yet. We're still using it. He doesn't like it, but he hasn't.
It's a really broad word that can get construed in a lot of different ways.
This is more generic and should not be in the least bit for participating in the services provided by DFMDC. This will come back, by the way. You're going to see that word utility a lot, and we have not agreed on what we want to call it.
I know we've said that DFM is a utility for the industry. Like I said, I was just questioning, what does that actually mean to me as a contributing member? What actual hands-on participation in the services am I going to have? Whether
So
you call it a utility or services.
What you're going to see is and Denise, you can show this if you want to. I mean, you could kind of preview it for them if you want to.
Preview the command.
The governance tab of the command center. Yeah,
sure. Give me just a second.
It is a working group, so we can preview stuff like that. It's not 100% operational at the moment. Denise got access to it yesterday to be able to kind of start playing with. So don't expect too much at the moment, but the structure and function of where things are going to be will be able to be visualized from what we can show you.
Let me go to Chrome. As you know, I got to go to Chrome to get this. While I'm getting this up, though, so Linda, to your point about utility or services or something else, I can make it a little bit more specific to the governance, but contributing members might do more than, services is somewhat broader, and they actually might want to do more than just necessarily governance. It could be.
Well, they really wouldn't be able to do much more except to be able to participate in working groups and potentially a steering group. So, I mean, we could define it to really just limit it to those working groups, right?
Well, for the contributing members, I mean, if not, you're coming in as a DFM of some sort. Right,
and that's the other agreement that we haven't looked at yet. This one is literally, this is the trimmed down version. So, I mean, I'm agreeing with you, Linda. I think this can really specify the fact that as a contributing member, you're not getting a license. You don't have these other things. What you're here to do is to be able to participate in the standing up and effective working of the working groups and of the steering committee. And that work is valuable and should be called out here as far as that's what the scope is for the participation.
Right, with the intent of improving the industry.
Right. Yep.
Okay, so what I've got here is for participating in the governance of DFMDC services.
Okay. I mean, that's more straightforward as to what a contributing member would actually be doing.
Yeah.
Or getting out of the relationship.
Okay, I've made those changes and I've saved this under a new version. And everyone should be able to see this as well now. This is
Yeah,
the,
we see your dashboard.
Dashboard.
so I'm going to go into, let's see.
Organization support. Yep.
To, I don't have it.
You're just blue tab in the upper right-hand corner, right?
Oh, there it is. Governance. So this is what they're going to see. We saw the navigation page before, right? So they had the 2 red boxes. Okay. They've checked the MOU. They've gone to the MOU landing page. They've agreed to that. They've agreed to the terms and conditions, which, by the way, includes some important NDA and antitrust language. They've agreed to that. They're going to come here, and they're going to see a message here. And here's their documents. We're still working on this. But they'll have an opportunity. Now, this is going to be the governance person's view, right? They'll have an opportunity now to look at these documents here, sign them, docu-sign them, and then save them. And then the governance lead will see them as well.
So digital signature time next to where the uploaded file is for their piece with a hash that's for the specific record, and you know, maintaining the integrity of the time frame for each one of the actions.
So this
And
is,
as a
this is
contributing member-
blockchain enabled?
There's a component of blockchain involved in here, yeah.
Good question. I love that idea, Linda. We've talked about it because then it's recorded on the blockchain, right?
Yeah.
So we're hashing all the information at the moment so that it can go to where all of this needs to go. At the moment, the blockchain elements are connected to the DFM member users. So those are the pieces that I will really need the blockchain piece for. Right now, the database structure that's doing the timestamping of every historical transaction that's taking place will capture this with ample detail that will represent its immutability.
Okay.
In terms of the documents that then are provided, so there was some selection on the creation of this organization that said they were contributing or DFM member?
So you're actually looking at Denise's view at the moment. So Denise's view is where she gets to upload what the current version of the document is. The view from Linda's perspective would be each of these documents with a link, click to view and a click to execute. So basically it'll take you through the DocuSign of the document where it can be executed, and then a repository of what documents have been entered. But this is literally the admin's view of creating this.
Got it.
So
But then
Denise,
I was going to say for contributing members, so John signs in, he would see contributing MOU, contributing member agreement, as opposed to DFM member.
Yeah, or it might just, yeah, he won't see this. So they won't have access to stockholders agreement. They won't have access to, you know, so if I'm a contributing member, I'm only going to see the documents I can sign and nothing.
right, it's all access control for what's displayed on each of the screens. Denise is the only one, I mean, I'm a backup to her. So if Denise can't implement a governance change or a new objective to be voted on, so the voting tab is underdeveloped at the moment or under displayed at the moment, but you'll see, excuse me, in the roles and responsibilities, and this is what Denise creates here is what shows up on the other governance components. So her edit screen in the upper right hand corner of this little panel allows her to be able to create the text that is describing everything that every governance person is going to see when they land on the very first page. So there's ability to put videos in here and training material and any other links to any other external material that we would want to in here. But this allows us as DFM Data Corp to be able to manage the messaging in real time to the governance representatives of the other companies.
Got it.
Same with the documents, same with the roles and responsibilities, same with the voting elements.
But to your point, if I'm a member, then I will see only those DocuSign documents
that are relevant to the type of member that you are, yes.
Okay, so getting back to the document themselves. Again,
Yeah, thanks for the tour. That was fun.
Yeah, no, thank you. That was
Good to
fantastic.
see.
it's helpful to see it. It really is. All right, so this was a contributing member MOU. I have made these changes for participating in the governance of the DFM service.
And just by the way, while that's fresh in everybody's head, that last tab there to the right was that ideas tab.
Yeah.
And the ideas tab is where all of the new ideas birth from. And they have that tracking of who created it first, which steering committee or which working group it went to, which issues were created from that idea that bubble up to being something that's on the steering committee for review. So we have full tracking from that first user's idea of, boy, it'd be great if we had this, to each of the upswelling to the point that it gets to the steering committee. So the visibility for the steering committee to be able to make an informed decision should be really, really tight.
Well done.
Okay, so for the CM, short for contributing member, for participating in the governance of the DFMDC services offered. So I've taken out the utility and replaced it with that. Is that acceptable language?
Would it be the governance of the offered DFMDC services? I don't know.
That sounds cleaner. I like that better. And the other question that we had was, do we want to have a expiration date on the MOU? That was something that Mike had brought up. And I think we landed on, we don't want an expiration date on the MOU.
Because it's not particularly legally binding, right? It's just like, hey, this is
what we're trying to do. Here's a
we're in
roadmap.
agreement that we think that working together is positive, and let's take next steps. If you don't take next steps, this is kind of a moot document, right?
Right. At that point, they bail, and then we get a notice on our side that says they didn't implement the memorandum of understanding. And at that point, Denise will follow up and say, what was the issue? What caused you concern?
Right.
Of course, we'll see this because there'll be an action tied to this. The only thing else that we do need to consider is, and Michael and I have had this conversation, is contributing members can be singletons or they can be on behalf of the organization. And we've just left it as contributing member and not necessarily contributing member or contributing member organization. It's sort of the conversation we were just having. There aren't going to be many of them, really. So I don't know that we have to make it confusing by adding organization. I'm looking at.
Could you do is entered into by contributing member individually or on behalf of, and then just have a space that either gets auto-populated or not when you put that individual into the registry? If they have a company that's, I don't know, does that, because you kind of want it in the document, the representation of what company is being, or maybe it's not necessary, maybe you have it somewhere else, but.
Interesting. So something like here. Right?
Yeah, and then company.
Yeah.
And you want to go back to that or on instead of R-H-O-O.
Thank you. And this sort of then references the conversation we were having a minute ago. That does sort of.
Denise, I think you can actually remove the word agreement from this MOU is a non-binding agreement. I think you can just say is non-binding, except as referenced.
Like that better?
It's tighter.
It is tighter. And I also like this, or on behalf of blank company.
It could be a company or association or academic institution.
Yeah, in our system, we call it an organization from a variable perspective. So that's what we'd
Right.
want to be able to populate in here.
Yep. I like that better.
Yeah, because then when they sign, it's authorized representative, right? So they're doing it either on their
On behalf
their
of
own
themselves
or
or on behalf of a company, right?
Yeah, and I think that makes that I can comfortably sign it either way, as an independent human being or on behalf of, DFM as an authorized representative. So, or DFM Data Corp.
And that sort of handles the conversation we were having.
Yep.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I like it.
Okay. And I think that clarifies that their voting will then be on behalf of their organization as well, if they're putting an organizational name in there. Yes. Because it's not individually or, it's individually or. So it kind of makes it definitive.
And you're right, that's something we need to see. So from a navigation perspective, they have to be able to somehow, Michael, be able to input the fact that it's a specific organ, whatever their contributing member name is or their organization.
I have that upon creation of them. When I'm first adding them, I'm assigning the role and the connection to the organization.
And can you make that auto-populate that organization slot?
I can, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, because that would just make it tight, and it always makes.
Yeah, because this is after
like,
you've logged in. This is after you've just changed your password. So I have the variable of who you are and what organization you're connected to or not.
Yep. Perfect.
Okay. So in the interest of time, I'd like to move on to the contributing member agreement. You'll see, everyone will see this version of it. Okay. Let me make sure I've saved that. Save your work, right, Michael? We must.
Or redo your work, one of the two. If you don't do the first, you're going to do the second.
Prefer the first.
Yeah, actually, Denise, if you wanted to, you could send a copy of that over to Mike and to David and for their preparation for joining us shortly.
Yeah, which will be shortly. Okay. Let me do a new share and then I can do this. That way you guys can be looking at it.
Which one is up next, Denise?
I'm sorry?
Which one is up next? I was going to pull it up separately.
Member agreement. So I think this should be the next one. So this is now, you've done the MOU, right? So now this is the big one. This is sort of like it's going to steer everything else. And this will have some conversation here. So I'm going to put this up. And while you guys are looking at this, let me send this in the background. To Mike and to David.
Were there any changes from what you sent yesterday, Denise?
There
beyond just accepting the red updates?
There were not.
Okay.
I think the only ones that I saw that were changed were things like, and initially in C, the recitals, it said USPTO, and that's been changed to U.S. patent number, things like that, but nothing that's.
No, and that's the version that you guys saw yesterday, that I sent out yesterday at 1. This was, some of these changes have been incorporated.
So Denise, at the very bottom of this first page, it seems like the word agreements is just floating here, and
it just needs to be, I'll make certain the formatting is correct, because every time we make changes, it sort of wonks up the format.
So I saw that, and then I didn't know if that when I looked at it as being agreements above what was there for contributing member qualifications criteria and contributing member benefits and contributing member obligations.
Okay, I'll make sure that in the final version that they do tie together. So let me walk through some I think are the important differences, okay? That you've seen some of these before. Linda, I'm conscious you have not. In the recitals, we felt like it was important to note that this initial steering committee has been stood up. And there's 2 DFM, which is you and Jeff, and then 1 neutral, and that is John. And I feel very safe with calling John a neutral standard development organization member, because that's where he spends all his time, on some standards body, right? Note that it's not called out which standards body, it's just
right. Neutral.
He's an SDO, pick one. An important add here, Linda, and I know these other guys have seen it, is that we pulled this from the corporate bylaws as an important part of why we're doing this. That was Michael's suggestion, and I thought it was a very, very good add.
Denise, on that one, is it simple majority of shareholders or simple majority of shares?
Well, the shareholder language says shareholders. This is actually right out of the corporate bylaws. So if this is, and it might not be correct, but if that's the case, then we need to change the corporate bylaws as well. So I guess that would be a Michael question. It's right here is where we're talking about.
Yeah. And I was, reading shareholders, I'm thinking of voters as opposed to, the impact of the number of shares each voter has.
That's a good,
It's simple majority, you're right. Michael?
let me look at the corporate bylaws, in fact, because if that's the case, then we should probably change the bylaws as well.
Yep, sounds like there's an edit to make if that's truly the terminology.
Yeah, I just copied and pasted this from the bylaws, but I can double check. Let me make a note to do that. Check. From bylaws, need to resolve. And it would have to be changed to simple majority vote, period, right?
Or of shares. But that was my thinking.
Yeah, because you can have a shareholder like Michael that this would just give him 1 vote, whereas he owns the vast majority of the shares outright.
Okay. Michael, do you have the bylaws handy? Because I'm sort of navigating this.
Sure. 1 second.
See if I can find it.
And technically, you could change it here before it's approved to be changed in the bylaws. Because this is just giving purpose, and that purpose doesn't have to be a direct quote out of the bylaws.
What was that? I'm sorry, say that again, Liz.
I said if we make the change here, we can do that before making an official change in the bylaws, because this isn't putting itself out there as a direct quote from the bylaws. It's just stating the purpose of the corporation as it is also stated in the bylaws, but there's nothing about process that we would have to change it in the bylaws before it was changed here.
Yeah. And I'm looking for this in the bylaws, actually. I know we took bylaws. I think I got this from you.
It's right near the end.
It's one of the last things in miscellaneous, I believe. Yeah, it's actually section 10.8.
There it is, use of monies. It does say shareholders by simple majority vote of the shareholders. And we should say change that to simple majority vote of the shareholders.
Okay with an expedite?
Hang on.
There's two of them you need.
I mean, at the moment, it does identify that this is done by the board of directors.
It does, the board of directors and or officers, legal.
But the final approval is the simple majority.
Which,
Of
so
the
it should be of
shareholders.
share. It should be of shares. Or share votes. I mean, that the voting that takes place is based off of the number of votes that each shareholder has.
Right, but that wording, the simple majority vote of the shareholders,
Yeah,
would
is
be-
not clear. Yeah, it should
Yeah.
be.
it would definitely be open for debate.
Okay,
So I agree with Linda that the change should be made here, and we'll take care of the edit in the bylaws with what Jonathan is preparing for the resolutions.
okay. So I'll just add this then to come back to it. Got it, all right. I don't want to put the changes on the review because it gets hard to read. Anything else, guys, on that? Oh, by the way, we've been joined by David and Mike. Welcome, guys.
Good morning. Good morning.
Morning.
Hey, good morning, guys.
To catch you up, guys, did look through the contributing member MOU. I think it's fairly well scrubbed. I sent it to you. We'll have a chance to review it throughout the week.
I received it.
Okay, so these are the contributing member qualifications. So Linda, you're coming in as a contributing member, right? So we're saying any for-profit, nonprofit organization, educational, blah, blah, blah. This is very broad. It's meant to be broad. The IP attorney, by the way, did not take exception to this. Where this changes from the DFM is that you'd be admitted upon execution of the MOU, the antitrust, and Michael, we've got to sort of lock down these because the antitrust is not a separate document they sign, but instead is resident within the terms and conditions.
You
Then,
could put terms and conditions, including antitrust agreement, just in brackets.
which is where we've landed.
Yeah, because you want to make it a point that it's there, but yeah, that works.
I like that better.
So as a contributing member and as a representative of DFM, how do I fit into this listing? Because DFM is, I guess, any so it doesn't matter. I mean, really, this is hugely broad.
It's very hugely broad, and it does.
Okay.
Yeah, and you've
Okay.
signed the MOU as who you're representing, right?
Right. So as a for-profit corporation, which DFM is, that would fit under that designation.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
And you pretty much hit any possible other place people could come from.
Or other enterprise supportive of this corporation's purposes, which is fairly broad. It doesn't say I'm a Bob Voltman. I'm not officially an enterprise, but again, they've self-identified with the MOU.
There is nothing in here that allows for an individual, though. It's all about enterprise or corporation. So to have John have a slot where he's not specifically coming in under a organizational name, we need to have any individual.
An individual.
There it has to be something that allows an individual to participate, because this doesn't.
How about here?
Or other enterprise or individual supportive of. Just add individual after enterprise.
Or in, yeah, that's good. Individual. Or other enterprise or individual supportive of this. I think that's fine, don't you? That sort of covers that.
Yeah, I mean, it covers the gaping hole of someone not being able to come in as an independent human.
I agree. And we will, and we could have those. It could be a Bob or someone that Michael says, look, this person is going to be hugely instrumental, but they're actually coming in as themselves.
Mm-hmm.
I like that. And then this is where the applicants, I'm right here, applicants shall be admitted as a contributing member upon execution of the following. We've already talked about the MOU. We've talked about the terms and conditions. We've talked about how they're going to navigate that. Includes antitrust agreement. This document, the contributing member agreement, and upon completion of the contributing member governance onboarding module, which just basically means they can't just send us paperwork. They have to go through the module, and the module is what you guys just saw, right? The documents that some are DocuSign, et cetera, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, Denise.
Hey, yes, Mike.
Quick question. Linking back to the above paragraph, if we say applicants, it was really referring to the enterprise companies, right? So an individual would have to be following all these as well.
An individual would have to be part of the enterprise?
An individual would have to follow all of these requirements as well?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah, right here. Applicants would be anyone that fit this designation right here. Was that the question, Mike?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So if you've done if you're any of these, then you're
You equal applicant.
Yep. Good question. All right, and these are the benefits. Again, this is the pared down version. So, Linda, this is you. You're coming in as you, or a Bob Voltman, you know. So you get to attend. These are workshops, not work groups. This is intentionally workshops because Jeff might want to have a workshop lunch and learn that, you know, if we talked about having some sort of a certification, perhaps, you know, blockchain 101, or you know, whatever workshop is a kind of a cool value add, the contributing members get to attend those workshops.
Mm-hmm.
The right to participate in activities of the steering committee, if so invited, because you could have a contributing member. Let's just say a Bob Voltman comes in and says, yeah, I don't actually want to be part of the steering committee. I do want to be on the work group. So they can,
Mm-hmm.
certainly they can be. And if they do, they have to be, you know, we'll talk about how they can be on this steering committee, but you don't have to be on the steering committee if
To
you're
be a contributing member.
correct.
Yeah. But it'd be nice to have a pool of expertise that we could pull into the steering committee conversations as needed.
I think big value add to this, and you guys are very well connected, so you can see how this also becomes a marketing and sales sort of activity, where we've got lunch and learn with Bob Voltman, lunch and learn with, you know, whomever. That there's some cachet to that, and I'm hoping we do those types of workshops.
Yeah. Virtual lunch and learn.
Yes, yeah.
It'd be nice to have them in person again sometime, but yeah.
Those days are long gone, huh?
Mm. When will they ever come again? To know.
I don't know. And then subject to procedures, I'm looking at this last bullet, the right to review, comment, and vote on work group issues. This is sort of generic language. So these are their benefits. You're a contributing member, here's your benefits. Those are actually before the obligations by design, because we want them to go, hey, this is kind of cool. Any comments before we move on to that? And by the way, the language that we settle on here, it will also move into the other document. So we'll be able to, you know, cut some good ground here if they're in both documents. All right, here's your obligations. So now, Linda, I'm asking you, this is what you need to be doing as a contributing member. And this just means that you are agreeing that the first rule of order is and will always be the DFMDC corporate rules, bylaws, etc. for avoidance of doubt.
Gotta love antitrust policies.
So this right here, the antitrust policy, I've changed this bit. So, and this is for the rest of the team. We went back and forth about the antitrust policy, and what I had in here before was a little too restrictive per the IP attorney. So instead what I did was I just pointed to the antitrust agreement as adopted by the board. And what I've done is said, okay, if you agree to this, it means you've agreed to the antitrust policies, which by the way, are the ones they've already signed off on that are part of the terms and conditions.
But this specifically is for the contributing members, and you have DFM member there under antitrust policy. So
My bad, I should have did not see that one, but I got all that.
and then you have upon DFM member 30 days after,
Good pickup.
and
Late.
one above it as well.
Got it. Yeah, thank you for that. That was a cut and paste yesterday. After
Mhm.
Now, at this point, should I state that the antitrust policy and guidelines are also, as bound by the antitrust agreement? Should I probably say as found in the terms and conditions, or as signed off in the terms and conditions?
Well, they're signing off on them here again. So do you have to note that they are also signing off on it elsewhere?
Well, we've stated in the MOU and in the language that the terms and conditions contain the antitrust language here.
Right. So we're saying we're being redundant, but do we need to tell them we're being redundant repeatedly?
I don't know, and I could take this.
What Keith identified in the last meeting was we just have to identify which document prevails. There has to be a definitive element of the fact that as is previously defined, and that's the document that's prevailing. You're not overriding the last one.
You're just saying it. Okay, so which document?
And again, this is still going to go through attorney review. We have two more, attorneys that are on call after these discussions to be able to get it so that the legalese is all done properly for this, because none of us on the call today are lawyers. So, I mean, I don't think we have to spend a ton of time on the legalese. If there's a question that's there of, redundancy or reference terms and conditions, I think we should try to be able to identify what those points are and realize that there's legal counsel that's already been retained, that's familiar with the documents that are underway, with objective of being able to put the legal language in here. So if we identify something that's not exactly the way that it should tie, I think we should put a note and share it and let the lawyers do their part of trying to be able to get the legal language precise.
You mean you want them to have something to do?
Well, I mean, we could try to do it for them, but we're whatever effort we're going to put in here, they're going to rewrite it. So,
Okay, that's a good note. So I'm just going to add this comment here. Yeah. So this would be a legal question, and I don't know the answer to that. Okay. So Linda, are you comfortable then that we'll cover this section off then with legal?
Yeah, no, that's perfectly fine.
All right, so going on to organizational matters. Now these are members, right? And this is, I had promised that you'd see the word utility.
Again, yes.
And it's throughout the document, and it just appears that Keith had, who's the IP attorney, had some issues with the word utility. But when I asked him, is it utility? Because utility is a legal term that connotates certain, legal ramifications. And his response wasn't entirely clear to me. It doesn't sound like it, but whatever word we choose, and I'm going to say this to the team now, we have to choose it soon, and we have to be consistent, because we don't want to keep going back and forward with legal. So I can leave it utility for now, but just know that might change to services or value-added services or utility services or something. We know it's not going to be fan block.
It's still a little broad.
Yeah.
I love value add services. That sounds super positive, and
I think that the word utility, the reason we were attracted to it is because it denotes more than that it's a function. It's a position. It's an attitude. It's a promise. It's, it's a lot of things, and it's very fitting.
it's very broad and could leave us open to some strange interpretations by other definitions of utility.
Exactly, as in who gets to join. And that was Keith's point. Is it everyone gets to join a utility? If so, do they have to pay $100,000? Or is it really just something private amongst members? In which case, you call it something else.
Potentially, but I like, he was the only person so far that raised it as a potential problem. I'm not sure it's a problem that needs solving. Like the question, not the question of the word, the question of whether or not we might be misconstrued or something as being something that serves anyone who wants to just walk in, as opposed to that you have to pay. I just don't see the distinction as being something that has to be dealt with. It, like I'd say it would be interesting if it came up, but it's like, I don't even see what the problem is. The answer to the question is no, you got to pay.
Yeah, there might be laws on the books in different, locations that say
Yeah, that was my
that
question.
there's access rights around utilities, and you don't want to fall afoul of a word being misconstrued in a way that can make
But
you
that was the
have
reason
to.
we asked, is this a legal term? Because if it is, then sure, we'll have to deal with it. But if it's not a legal term,
It wasn't.
Sorry,
The
go ahead.
response wasn't clear to me, but Linda's bringing up a good point. It might actually not be a legal word in the state of Georgia. It might actually be a legal word in California or another state. And I think we just have to resolve this one once and for all. We just have to pick a name. We're not going to do it on this call. We're not making decisions. We're just reviewing.
Yeah.
I've added a note. Is utility a non-starter? What is the best term? And then once we decide on that, we'll make certain it's good. But these are things we have to decide soon, because the attorneys are expensive. We need to use
use their time wisely.
Yes.
I'm going to do the next simplest edit, and that's adding the E at the end of my name. And I'm sure Michael dropped it just to make sure that I actually proof the document.
Just want to make sure you were paying attention.
Yeah, it's just for fun.
I am so sorry. My bad.
Don't worry. This is not the first document that it's been
It
misspelled
happens
on.
often.
It will not be the last. So I
With me,
definitely don't take it personally.
With me, it's the second F.
Yeah.
That one's on me. All right.
No worries at all.
Getting back, meeting of members, guys, and this was the conversation that we had last week in the last steering committee. So you'll remember this one, Linda. But the meeting members is the shareholder meeting of DFM of the corporation, right? And the question here is, and this is mostly lifted from the corporate bylaws, but at the annual meeting of shareholders and DFM members, are contributing members allowed to attend, Michael, your annual stock shareholder meeting?
They may be invited.
That's what
I get to come anyway because I'm in the fold, but I think that would be a really cool incentivizer for people to want to to participate in this capacity if there was the possibility that they could kind of be on the at the shareholder meeting. I don't know. I think it's good. And it still puts it in the corporation's, ballpark, where if Michael says, you know what, these contributors should be allowed to participate and these shouldn't, here we have these two buckets, and these are a positive and these are not necessary or not, are potentially a negative. I don't know.
Yeah, there's in a shareholder meeting, there's typically a part of the shareholders meeting that has to do with business of the shareholders, and a part of it that has to do with the fun part of a shareholders meeting. And I think there's the opportunity to be able to have invited guests to the shareholder meeting, but there's also a level of business that's expected to be done. And as a non-public company, you don't want to make it so that it's required to be able to have that disclosure available for everybody who's not a shareholder to be able to be a part of. So just wouldn't want to paint ourselves in a corner with it. But I think the opportunity to be able to invite contributing members, specifically for some recognition and identification of their work, things that they were a part of and that they helped to be able to bring forth as the digitization of this industry, that would be a super opportunity to recognize those people,
Yeah, no, I think that's great.
I'm realizing this is redundant too. The annual meeting of shareholders and DFM members. Really, the DFM members should go out.
They are shareholders.
They are shareholders.
Are all DFM members going to be shareholders?
Yes.
Guaranteed. Okay.
Yes. Or they're contributing members. They're one of the two. And shareholders are DFM members because they've had to sign the shareholder agreement. If they don't sign the shareholder agreement, at least that's what we said, they're not a DFM member.
Okay.
Okay, moving forward, steering committee. This is language that you guys have seen before. This was in the very, very first governance advisor meeting. So
do you want to highlight all places that utility is used while we go through it, just so that it's easier?
Yeah, I can do a search on that one. Yeah.
Okay.
Just in the interest of time. I've gotten pretty good at finding a replace, not perfect. But all right, and this is, again, this is language you've seen before. These are dates that we've all agreed to before, or at the discretion of the board. This just means that Michael can dissolve it no later than December 31st, or when he wants to. This is the same language that we discussed last week. We're going to go from 3 to 5 to 11. And I'm moving through this because there are things we do need to discuss. And this was based on our conversation with Keith. And I need everyone to get to this section. All right, here's what's changed. 1 permanent seat at the discretion of the board. We did have 2. Now we have 4. We did have 3. And Keith's concern was that this would definitively not pass antitrust if you had 2 that were permanent and that you had 3. There's other guidance he gave us that you'll see, but this was the first one. That the contributing members have increased by 1, and the permanent seat, which is a DFM seat, has decreased by 1. There's still 5, and they're still DFM DC, but they've just changed.
Principle is one seat, 1 vote, 1 company, 1 vote per company.
Yes, yeah, and we're going to see that in a minute. And in fact, I'm going to get to that because this is really.
Hey, Denise, under that DFM members, back where you were, I think you did a copy paste with this, the sentence, "This 1 seat will fill," under DFM members, the last sentence there.
This 1 seat will fill the role of steering committee.
It doesn't
vice
define
chair
the seat.
and will be elected by.
It looks like you copy pasted from the board of directors with that same language.
This seat, 1 of these seats is what I should have said.
Yeah.
1 seat, will fill the role of steering committee vice chair and be elected by DFM members. Yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah, that's good catch. Good catch. All right, guys, and I'm gonna just, you'll understand why I'm doing this here in a second, but this is where we need to really spend some time. And this is the guidance that we had from Keith. So you see I've changes from 1 to 4. 1 is board appoints. 4 are still invitation of the board. But Keith had some real heartburn that we had 5 seats that the board could elect and that they had 5 votes. He had real heartburn. He said, because the board appoints I'm just going to say appoints 5 of the 11 seats. That's too heavy. You can't do it that way. I didn't change the board appoints. I still said, okay, they still get to have 5, and 1's permanent and 1 has different terms, but they only get 1 vote. 1 DFM staff and 5 contributing members, that should be 4.
4, yeah.
Represent 1 vote. So now all these 5 people get 1 vote. This is a big change. The DFN members, 6 seats represent 6 votes. And I put in other language that it has to be 6 separate companies. You can't have 3 from, truck stop. So this is a fairly big change because now we get
It's a major change.
Yeah, we get 1 vote, all these 5 seats. And the other change is that the DFM members in good standing get to vote for their DFMs. We do not. Now, we do vote on steering committee issues, and that's fine. But we don't actually vote for the DFM members. So I'm going to pause there because all the language in the forward part of the document just explains this, supports this.
I guess where I have a question is, yes, you have individuals like John Greaves that are by invitation of the board, but he's independent. So you're saying that he would have to come in under the consensus of 1 DFM vote because he is on the steering committee as an invitee of the board.
If he was serving as an individual, as you were just describing, for you being able to serve as an individual or him being able to serve as an individual where they're not representing the corporation, they can't be considered independent, that is with an independent organization, because they're appointed as an individual by invitation. And that's where the attorney has identified that there's an issue, is us inviting that person to be a contributing member and them signing the contributing member agreement is in the view of antitrust as being that those people would vote like we would ask them to.
Okay, but what if you get a beta and you get a representative of beta that you invite to the board and they're one of the first 5, and then you tell them, I'm sorry, you can't have a vote because we invited you and you have to just go along with the DFM. I'm just trying to process.
I think it's appropriate pushback, and it's appropriate pushback that I feel also.
I think the distinction is not invite, it's appoint. So if you're putting somebody in the seat and that's that, no one else gets a say on that, then that to me is what he was communicating. That means you control that vote.
Yeah, I think the 2 DFM staff, if you had 2 and now you just have 1 DFM staff, that's legitimate that they are controlled by the board. But I know you're inviting people in this first block that are individuals that aren't voting your party line. They're saying what's best for the industry, and to say that their vote doesn't count because you invited them, that just rankles.
I guess I'm looking at it differently. So I'm BITA, I'm IEEE, I'm GS1, and I'm IBM, and I'm just naming 4, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm Jeff. Jeff could vote one way, but the other 4 people could feel very strongly and could vote another way. So their actual vote counts and would override just vote.
It, so you're saying that the 5 votes that come from the board appointed or board invited individuals come in collectively and are tallied, and the majority is actually the vote that's cast. So if you have 3 out of 5, then whatever those 3 are, that is the one vote that is registered.
That is correct.
Doesn't have to be that way.
No, that's just this is
This is a work through that Denise has come up with after the feeling of what we heard from Keith yesterday. We, DFM Data Corp, could appoint one person, and that one person be controlling that one vote.
Mm-hmm.
But then the other folks don't get any voice if we appointed them.
Right, but if you invite them and they're from a distinctly separate
Okay, so if they're representing that distinctly separate organization, then I think you can make that distinction for their vote to count. If they are coming in as, oh, I'm on 19 standards bodies and I'm independent and I'm not representing any one of those, then they're saying that that's a vote that is not neutrally based. Can't prove that it's neutrally based.
So
if
John
you had
would
a
be more
neutral
of like an
organization,
advisory input to the vote of DFM, but
unless his contributing member agreement came in representing an organization, where that organization was what he was representing in his neutrality position.
Mm-hmm.
The other way, which I think is more complicated, is, and this was Keith's alternative, was to have the contributing members vote for them. So the 4 contributing members get to vote who gets to be a contributing member, and it's not invitation of the board. I just think that's going to be very complicated and adds another layer of complexity, and it's going to slow things down. So the way I did it was, because you've got 5 votes that actually equal 1 vote. The DFMDC is only one of the other of 5, and it is majority rule. So if all 4 of these independent bodies really feel strongly about something, they would overrule the board appointee.
What if you have a 2 and 2 and you have, 3 of them show up and have the one board appointee, and the board appointee and 1 person go one way and 2 others go the other way? How do you count vote? Because you have to have a tiebreaker. And I know if all 5 are present and all 5 are voting, that's not an issue, but that's a perfect world that doesn't exist.
They have to be, in order to vote, they have to vote either in person or by proxy. So they've got to strike a vote. If we don't have a quorum, then you can't vote.
Okay, and what represents a quorum in this structure?
In this structure, a quorum is
a majority of the steering committee members entitled to vote. So you could honestly have none of the parties that are board appointed be present and still have a quorum.
Or by proxy.
Or you could, no, but I'm saying you could have 6 DFM members show up and you would have a quorum.
That's the majority.
Right, 6 is the majority out of 11.
Yeah, you're right. I'm looking at that. We could either make that a supermajority, in which
that was Keith's other example of what can take place, is that on certain type of issues, you can enter this supermajority vote capability of, like, for financial elements or for tax issues related to corporate affairs. You would have this supermajority vote. He said it gets complicated, which sounds really expensive to me.
Yeah, it does. Could we say that a quorum represents at least, remember, it's in person or by proxy, right? And we're talking people. It's not talking 100 people. So we could say a quorum represents at least 4 of the 5 board appointees or elections, and at least 5 of the 6, or somehow
So just keep in mind that the majority of these votes that are going to take place are going to be with people logging into their computer and credentializing into the command center and logging what their vote was. It's not going to be with a meeting of people that have to physically sit together. That's the point of us making it so that we have the whole voting panel, correct?
Yeah,
Where
but
we said we're going to lay this out and have 10 days and notifications and.
she's right though, because the quorum, if for some reason 5 of the 6 people are, all the DFM members show up, it's already stacked in their favor. So I do need to add some quorum language, and that's fine. We can do that. Say a quorum represents, 4 of the 5 board appointees and 5 of the 6. You see where I'm going with that, Linda?
Yeah. No, I think it's necessary because you have to protect against possibilities. Although they're not probabilities, they're possibilities. I wouldn't want to have DFM hijacked in some way because there was an ability for the DFMs to, take some point of order and.
Yeah, so just as a matter of course, that there isn't an ability for new business to come up, be brought up on, be voted on in that meeting and to override anything that's in place. I mean, just as a normal piece of business, if there's not something that's on the agenda already for a vote that has a notification beforehand for the vote, that you can't introduce something that nobody else would know about and get a vote. We have a mechanism to do this. So it's just what you're describing is if there were a physical meeting that DFM members didn't show up at, and these 6 people grabbed a sheet of paper and they wrote something up and said, we're a quorum and we did this and we can vote on this and now we changed this. It's just nothing can work that way. That's not the way our governance is set up. In order for an issue to be voted on, it's created as an idea that's then been upgraded to an issue where there's accountability of who created the idea and who seconded the idea to be able to make it so that there's an issue, so that it now comes for a working group to address and that working group to do research on it. And I mean, there's a whole, you're gonna get into
There's a lot of checks and balances on the front end.
This ain't getting there. You're not getting to a quorum in a meeting with a new idea to take over the company. Not gonna happen.
Yeah.
Not in their purview. They don't have the ability to bring up that business. That they are they're just in a committee.
Yeah, I guess
a committee that's appointed by the company.
Yeah, just haven't seen the language that lays out that business process flow. I mean, obviously, I saw what you pointed out on the website and how that can work, but it's just an awareness that things have happened in other structures that have been because of the type of majority possibilities.
I get that. I really do. And I appreciate the concern for it. It's the reason why, we can't find something off the shelf to be able to plug in is what does the voting module look like? I mean, we truly have had a significant amount of discussion around, with each organization, there are individuals that are identified as authorized signatories that are designated for that company as one of the 2 people that have the ability to cast a vote in the governance tab for them.
Mm-hmm.
And if a vote is issued by one of those 2 people within that company and it's timestamped for them and it's changed by the other one, there's an accountability of the change that took place. So that organization's representative vote and the first person gets a notification. I mean, we have to do all of that.
Right.
But at the time that there's a 10-day window and 2 days before we're sending out a notification to those that haven't responded yet, and a day before we're sending out notification to those that haven't responded, and 30 minutes before it closes, we're sending out a notification. I don't think there's going to be a big group of meeting quorum that's necessary. There's a process that's been built for the notification as approved notification for this committee to operate on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
No,
that's kind of what I was just going to ask, is that it doesn't seem to me like a quorum is a suitable idea, because voting is going to happen in the structure that we've just talked about, outside of the time constraints of a particular meeting. right? And so it sounds like there's a moment where now there is something that is available to vote on, and then there's a time window while that vote is open. Could be minutes, could be days, and then after a certain point it closes. And if there weren't enough people who voted at that point, which is unlikely because we could all talk to each other and say, "Hey, go vote," then the vote wouldn't be valid because it would be sort of a back end quorum issue, not a front end quorum issue.
I want to respond to that, but I know Mike Turner, you've been trying to say something.
Yeah, thanks, Denise. My only question was circling back to Michael made a comment in reference to there are certain fiduciary discussion points that are germane to how you run the business or the financials of the business, or would we not want to still bring in certain areas that would require that supermajority if we're talking about something that can strategically impact the direction of the business from a foundational standpoint or a financial standpoint or something of that nature?
So I'm going to take both of those and then ask people to respond. So Mike, first of all, to yours, there is no CFO. The CFO responsibility resides with the board. There is reporting. There's a fiduciary reporting, but we deliberately wrote it that there's no fiduciary responsibility, just reporting, and that the board is responsible for anything that's CFO related. That means that the steering committee might have to provide a budget, et cetera, but it's more reporting. And then to your point, David, I feel like we have to have a quorum. We have to have quorum language, whether it's formal or not, or whether it's, voting is open and then, but at some point, if there is a requirement, that's the job of the steering committee, is to make those final decisions. And they can't make final decisions if they can't vote and then know, what does yes mean? Well, we've had 10 out of 11, that's the majority and everyone's voted.
So it sounds like you can't have a vote being officially opened unless there was a meeting with a quorum versus there being a meeting where it came out of committee and now there's just people saying, okay, let's open up the voting, and with no meeting.
Two different voting. So you've got the ideas or issues that come up, right? And then those get discussed at the working group level. And then the working group chairs will then submit the final and vetted ideas to the steering committee. The steering committee then votes on them. And it could be, we want feature A or feature B. That's their job. That's the steering committee's job.
And Denise, for that vote on the steering committee, how many votes would you expect? Is it 7 or is it 11?
But the way it's written, the majority is going to be, and that's a good question, is, so we know what a quorum is, right? But the majority is going to be that you've got actually 7. You've got 1 vote that represents all, technically DFMDC, because they've appointed 5 of the seats. They can't have really 5 votes. That was Keith's point. They get 1 vote. And how do they get the 1 vote? Well, then that is majority. 4 of them, 4 to 1 majority, there's 5, 3 to 2. Now we could say super majority, right?
There's also a pseudo veto power here, Mike, of the final straw here. I mean, if something is going the wrong direction and it's going through this, the board has to approve all of this. The board, at the end of the day, which is me, has the rights to identify that the direction of the committee is in the best interest of the corporation. And that's the reason why it stood up. It's here to be able to serve as this business unit for the company. So if it's doing something that is not in the best interest of the business, the board has the opportunity to be able to intervene.
And that was that little section that we looked at the very beginning where we said, don't forget, point number 1 is you all agree that the corporate bylaws, rules, blah, 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 are the actual, that is what rules everything else.
Right. And Keith was talking about being able to create like a new set of rules around what this new governance organization would work around. And that's really what this member rules document is the, what would almost be considered as a divisions governance but there's no reason to have a new governance for this. The board rules works really, really well. It identifies the capability of creating the committees, and the only thing that's left is the fact that when these committees are stood up, is as long as they are working in accordance with the best direction of what the business is, and I think that language has been understood by the attorneys and added into the documents.
In regard to that, Michael, since the board does have the overarching rule, regardless of the steering committee's vote, do you have any process in place that is a pathway to being a member of the board? That, I mean, I can only imagine that you're going to have the leaders in the DFM space wanting to say, how can we have a bigger voice? Is there a pathway in place for that already or not?
The thought for that is for that pathway to emerge over the next 5-year period of time, for my diminished role in the utility and the increased role of the number of DFMs.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we plan on onboarding more and more of these entities, and we have not capped the number of members of the steering committee. We've just identified that it would need to be able to stay in an odd number for consistency of voting purposes, but that they would always have the majority interest in this. And the way that we've now had to modify this from the discussion with the legal side, I mean, our vote, the DFM Data Corp vote of this is really minuscule.
Yep.
I mean, in every situation, we're 1/4 of 1/7 of the vote.
Yep.
1/5 of 1/7 of the vote, as currently described. Okay,
Right.
so I mean, the direction of what we're doing as being completely for the industry and being transparent for the industry is, I mean, it's out there, because you're basically saying I'm barely voting on what these things are that are taking place. I've built the ecosystem and the environment for this to take place because I'm going to serve in this capacity as being the utility for the industry that enables this to take place. But we don't have very much vote that's left in here in order to be able to stay, you know, in compliance with the antitrust.
Right.
So, you know, you got to be transparent and with what the vision of the company is, and believe in and show it in every one of these documents, which is why it's intended to be so transparent and with the least amount of limiting language in it as possible, to get it so that we can provide this service to this industry that needs it so desperately.
Mm-hmm.
So going back to the quorum thing, based on this discussion, what if the quorum is a simple majority, but to call a vote closed, it's a supermajority? So whenever you're saying there's a vote needed, it's a supermajority, no matter what the topic. But to have the meeting and put the vote live requires a simple majority.
So supermajority is 2/3, right?
I believe so.
And 2/3 is 66%. I don't know. What do you guys think about that? This is a really good catch, and I think we should just spell it out and say a quorum means you've got 4 of the 5 board appointments who have voted, and you know, at least 4 of the 5 and at least 5 of the 6.
Yeah, I agree with you, because with 6 DFMs and the steering committee side of things, you could very easily get a lopsided outcome if you don't delineate that it needs to be a certain number of the board appointed and a certain number of the DFMs represented.
I agree, we're protected on the back end because at the end of the day, Michael does get to have that final say, right? But I think if we spell it out, and let's just play this forward. So we only get 2 of the 5 board appointments. I'm going to be on the phone and I'm going to be saying to Patrick, hey, Patrick, we don't have enough votes. Trust me, he does this to me, right? I'm doing we don't have enough votes. Really need you to strike your vote, friend, because we don't have a quorum without it. There's only 11 people here. Those are conversations a person can have.
Yeah.
Right.
I like it
And-
being spelled out specifically with the numbers as well.
Yeah, because it just balances the voice of the community.
Yeah.
Make sure you get sufficient input from all the key players, industry, standards bodies, DFMs.
Just to be clear, I realize that this quote veto power that is here can't be just swung around like an axe hammer either. There's a very selected points of time where you want to be able to exercise that. So ultimately, what I'm hopeful for is that the steering committee is aligned with the objectives of where we
No, absolutely.
Certainly.
Yeah, that's where my head was as well, in that you want individuals to understand the process is fair. So when they leave a meeting, there is no dissension. Everyone agrees to what we're trying to accomplish. Even if I might be the one that got overruled, I understand the rules of engagement. And if that veto power is used, then it can accomplish something, but then you dissuade individuals going forward based on feedback after the meeting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It would be pretty serious circumstances where it goes through all of that good process, and then, in all along the way, Michael, you would know that there's something brewing.
I'd like to think I would. And
Yeah.
I mean, if I'm, you all know me pretty well. I'm typically not one to get disconnected from things that are going on. And I don't think that's going to change in the near term. But I mean, that's the seat that I have kind of made for myself to be able to sit in, because I think it's a role that I can play effectively.
Well, there are multiple people who will bring it to your attention. It's just that simple.
Well, that's true. And Michael is diligent, but you do these not based on someone having a human error. You do these based on the process, taking ownership of that, so you prevent that from even being a possibility.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
You don't need it, but it happens, and you do need it. And if you don't have it written, then it's a bigger problem.
Right. And if you carry this out to its ultimate end, that, Michael, there's some issue and you feel the need to use your veto power, before you actually did that, you would have a sit down with all the parties and just say, how come we're so far apart here?
Yeah, I'm a little concerned about what the choices that have been made.
Yeah.
Can you help me understand this better?
And my goal,
I'm confused.
yeah, right. My goal of this conversation is for you guys to redo the vote, because this isn't good, and I don't want to use my veto power.
Or for me to understand what the reasoning is, and for you to convince me that this makes more sense. And if it makes more sense, then you'll have my full support.
That's right.
How did we get here?
The per load fees. If you just want to see what the coming question marks are going to be, that's going to be interesting conversation. So I'm curious as to what is going to be already established entering into these agreements that are just non-negotiables that are done, versus what are things about the DFM infrastructure that can be tweaked, modified, modulated, switched up, whatever. That's something that I've been contemplating a little bit.
This is reminding me of one thing. This was based on our discussion yesterday regarding there are multiple kinds of DFMs, and maybe the fee structure needs to have some accommodations for their differentnesses. And does that same thinking mean that if you had the board, the steering committee occupied by all DFMs that were brokers versus DFMs that were a mix of brokers and platforms and technology and other, that there would be the same outcome? Like, because the business prospects for a broker and how they become successful, et cetera, are a different dynamic than some of these other approaches to offering matching services.
Mm-hmm.
So are you suggesting that of the 6 DFMs, we categorize it into the aligning categories that we have?
I don't know, but I don't know. I guess I'm raising the issue, but But the issue of the fee itself could be very heated if it's not well represented at that moment, because it could potentially hurt some businesses. And if they weren't heard, that would be weird.
So for the purposes of the time left, because we have 5 minutes, I do want to bring your attention to this. I have changed nothing on the 5-person because this is another version of the interim. I'm hoping that this passes muster. I think it just gets really complicated if we have to change the 5 and 11. I'm fine with the 11. We'll have to pass that by with legal, but just so you know, this was by design, and that we have kept this the way it is. We go from 3, we're at 3 now, we go to 5 in December, that's not that far, and then we're gonna, as quickly as we can, move to 11. And then that's when the DFM voting and all that stuff actually takes. So I've made no changes to that. Michael, is there anything you wanted to cover in the last 4 minutes? Because I've captured these changes for both this document and the other. Conscious we haven't reviewed the whole thing, but many of the conversations we just had are just actually spelled out in, you know, in the document. Yeah.
Well, I think the true question here is for Linda and Jeff. You know, we've spent some time here going through the contributing member qualifications and rules, and through the changes to the MOU, and I think that was all very useful. I don't feel like we had the time to go through the DFM member memorandum of understanding as I had hoped to be able to get into in this call, but I think the conversation that we got into was quite good. But I'd also make my time available to be able to have a second working session to go over the other set of documents that I think is relevant for equal time.
Is this a let's schedule something for over the weekend, or let's schedule something for the beginning of next week? What do we have in mind here?
The
And I'm
participation
looking
is
for more time.
Yeah, I think the participation is important to be able to include John Greaves here as well, since he wasn't part of this meeting, but he could certainly get a copy of the recording for this meeting, and then you know, have us get back together where his involvement is here with the edits updated from what this conversation is as well. So Saturday morning I have a meeting that has at the moment, but besides that, I have other availability over the weekend if needed. I do have some stuff that are family related things, as I'm sure everybody does. You know, evening time, Monday, whatever. I'll make myself available, but I think the steering committee is made up of Jeff and Linda and John, and I'm truly here from a support standpoint to be able to try to get us to the best deliverables to the attorneys and to our customers so we can get started.
So Denise, could you just check with John and find out what his availability is? I can be fairly flexible over the weekend.
I will ask him. Yeah, if the weekend doesn't work, and I will, is there something on Monday that works? I'll clear up my calendar.
Checking. I just had a 1 p.m. that cleared for Monday. So I'm available between 1 and 3.
Okay. So if we can't do it this weekend, then I'll shoot for 1 to 3 on Monday.
Monday. Yeah, that works.
Does that work for you, Jeff?
Yes.
Okay. And then I will also change the DFM documents to reflect the changes we just made here. And then I'm happy to send then all 4 off to you if you'd like, or if that's
That'd
going
be
to be.
No, I appreciate that.
Yeah, we'll also have an updated copy of the license agreement this afternoon with the discussion with one of the attorneys. So if that's in shareable form, we'll include it as well. But there should be new language in there related to the DFMs that are brokers, related to the DFMs that are SaaS platforms, and the interoperability between a SaaS platform and a SaaS platform and a SaaS platform and a broker.
And I think that needs to be taken into consideration as we look at the 6 DFMs on the committee.
I think so
really
too.
think that was a great point. So
Yeah,
Yeah, I think it's a
Look
good
forward.
point for sure.
Okay, so we have that meeting at 3 with Chris, attorney. And
Yes.
so I don't confuse things. What I'll do is send out the updated docs that reflect today's conversation, as well as, if possible, the license agreement. I'll send it out by close of business today. I'll be in South Carolina, but I'll be able to do that. And then I'll check with John to see if we can do something over the weekend. But if not, if you could just sort of reserve 1 to 3 on Monday, then
already done.
you'll have had those documents over the weekend.
Very good.
Okay.
Wonderful. Thank you, guys.
Thanks,
right.
everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Nice work, Denise.